Hey everybody, I've got a really special episode for you this week. I am joined by Craig Camp from Troon Vineyards. He is a wine maker. He is a wine seller. He has 30 years plus experience in the wine industry, and he is also an expert in biodynamic wine. I was blown away by how good of a conversation this was. He was really interesting. He had a lot to share. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed conducting the interview. Wine can be really confusing. When you're starting out, it's hard to tell high-quality wine from a bottle of plunk. It can also get really expensive. Boy, have I found that out lately by looking at my bank statements. I did a lot of research to find a better way to buy quality wine without breaking the bank, and that's how I discovered an awesome website called Last Bottle Wines. Last Bottle Wines has fostered personal relationships with wineries across the world and offer one bottle of high-quality wine a day at 30 to 70% off. When the bottle is gone, it's gone. New day, new bottle, new savings. I recently ordered a Spanish Tempranillo. This wine normally retails for $74, and I got it from Last Bottle Wines for only $32. It's not a wine club, so there's no fees. Shipping is affordable and can even be free. You know, Mason and I are always after the best wines at the best price. We want you to enjoy the same deal. That's why we got you this special offer. Some of our listeners have already taken advantage of the deal and are loving the experience. All you need to do is go to lastbottlewines.com/invite/tastinganarchy to get $10 off your first purchase while helping your favorite Wine and Liberty podcast. That's lastbottlewines.com/invite/tastinganarchy to get $10 off a delicious bottle of wine at 30 to 70% off. Tasting Anarchy, your Wine and Liberty podcast. Join Mason and Jake each week as they try new wines and discover how much government is in your drink. You're one of the few winemakers that we've interviewed. We've had one more who's actually also from Oregon, from Portland, and he's got a winery in the city. And I don't remember how I came across you on Twitter, but I was just reading your little blurb on Twitter that says sharing our voyage into biodynamics, and I was like, ooh, this is the guy I want to talk to.
Okay. I'll try to do that for you.
All right. Well, I have already pressed record, so we are not live, but we're recording now. So
okay,
let's go ahead and get into it.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, I've already mentioned it. The main reason I wanted to have you on Tasting Anarchy was to talk about biodynamic wine, but I went over to your blog, which is winecampblog.com, and went over to the About section, and you actually have a really long tenure in wine in general, from not just making wine, but also selling wine, and you were part of the import business and everything like that. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about how you got into wine and basically your history? I mean, it's a long history, but it's an interesting story.
Yes, I have been doing it for a long time. Actually, what probably started me on it was when I was in college. I spent a semester studying, quote unquote, in Europe, and I was in Salzburg, Austria, on this exchange program, and then the summer following, I just felt, well, let's go travel around Europe. So I started hitchhiking around Europe like you did in those days.
Yeah.
And I got to France, and in France, I should drink wine. I don't think I'd ever had a glass of wine in my life. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. And then I came back to the United States feeling quite sophisticated, and then went to a wine shop and realized I didn't know a thing. And so I bought the Signet Book of Wine, which was kind of the book at the time, and just totally entranced me. And I ended up leaving a career in journalism and becoming part of a startup wine importer in late 79. And we built that up, building, it was in Chicago. We built importing estate wines first from Burgundy, and then Italy, and then interesting new estates from California and Oregon. And I sold that after 20 years, and then went to Italy and kind of immersed myself in winemaking, and then came out to the West Coast and worked in the Willamette Valley for a while. Then I was in Napa for about a decade, and then came to the Applegate Valley, which I'd had on my radar for a long time.
Now, Applegate Valley, is that a sub-region of another one, or is that its own region?
That is a AVA.
Okay.
It's right next to the Rogue Valley.
Okay.
So we're about an hour from the California border. It's a very unique area because we're up in the mountains. We're not like the Willamette Valley.
Yeah.
We're in the Siskiyou Mountains. Like the valley floor here is at about 1,400 feet. And the mountains here were jammed into the coast by tectonic plate movements. So we're not volcanic. So we have this combination of decomposed granite with sedimentary ocean and river soil. So very unique area.
Okay. I think I've actually driven through there a few times because I used to live in Sacramento, and we would drive up to Seattle every year.
Yes, that's you would come through here. Yes.
Yeah. We always really like to go camping in Southern Oregon on our way up because it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful region, and the weather's usually pretty nice. It smells really nice. It's just a really great place. So now you are now in Applegate Valley. What do you see as like differences between working in Southern Oregon and working in Napa and Willamette Valley, actually, even?
Well, it's a very unique ripening cycle here, and it's very distinct from the area. Obviously, Willamette Valley is ideal for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, early ripening varieties because it's cooler there and you want to slow them down. Napa is perhaps too much of a good thing. That's how I would describe it. It's so sunny and the season is so long that the challenge in Napa is to make a balanced wine because your sugars ripen before your flavors, your phenolics in that area, and we haven't figured out how to turn off a single aspect of a vine yet. The sugar and everything keeps going. So you sit there, but here, because of the latitude we're at, we get a very different ripening cycle because at the longest day of the year, in the summer solstice, we get about 75 more minutes sunshine than Napa Valley does.
Oh, okay.
So even though our season is shorter, the hours of photosynthesis end up being very similar because we don't have fog in the morning and things like that at this altitude. So we have a lot of really ideal summer for plants and photosynthesis, but then at harvest, it reverses, and the days get much shorter. So we get these really short days that are still warm. So that slows sugar accumulation, maintains acidity, so you can let the grapes hang and develop full phenolic ripeness without getting really high sugars. So that makes for high acid and moderate alcohol.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting because I have always noticed that California wines do tend to be very high in alcohol. And actually this last weekend I was out planting a vineyard with a friend of mine that I met online, and he's planting it in Texas, down in the Davis Mountain AVA. And that was one thing he mentioned too, is he says we get so much sun here and the season is so long that we need to see if we don't want to reduce sunlight exactly, but we want to plant the grapes in such a way that it kind of limits the photosynthesis so that we're not getting these really, really early ripening and not a good developed sugars, not a very good balanced wine. And he said that's a challenge in this area. So, and it seems like maybe parts of California actually have that problem too. And then when you start getting up a little higher into Oregon and Washington, you do get a little bit of a more, just a more balanced seasonal change. I mean, because these grapes that you're planting, I guess they're all European varietals, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, California in California in the fall, you'll get heat spikes. It can get really hot for long periods of time. And because of the shorter days here, we don't get that. And because we're quite close to the ocean, and the Rogue River cuts a gap through the Siskiyou Mountains here. So we get a really big diurnal shift. So it can be 105 in the afternoon, and by 9 o'clock it's 50. Oh, okay. And that's really typical. So that again really promotes thicker skins and more acidity in the wine. I think that kind of defines the Applegate Valley, is this high acidity with full flavors.
And what are some challenges that you've had in the Applegate Valley versus like Napa or the Willamette Valley?
Compared to California, of course, our biggest threat here is frost in the spring during bud break. But to tell you the truth, since obviously there seems to be climate change going on of some sort. We haven't really had frost issues for the last few years, so maybe that's a changing thing. The springs have been warmer, and obviously in the combination of the altitude and how far north we are, frost can be an issue. So that probably is our biggest threat. But other than that, it's a pretty ideal growing region because it's warm in the summer but extremely dry. So it's a very low humidity, so we have very low pressure from powdery mildew and insects and that sort of thing. So when we made the decision to move to biodynamics, the consultant I brought in, that was one of the first things he said. This is like the perfect place to grow biodynamically and organically, because it's just a naturally it's a good climate for vines.
Okay. Well, actually, right, that would have been a really great transition into biodynamic, but I did have one thought, though, on the climate change thing, is because one thing that Mason and I on this show have noticed is that, and I don't know if this is a trend or just an expansion of wine growing in general, but it does seem like more wineries are opening further north. Like there's a lot more opening up in even British Columbia, which I wouldn't even really think about that. Do you think that is as a result of climate change directly, or do you think that is just people expanding or learning how to grow things in cooler climates?
I think it's a little of both. I think that definitely people are looking for cooler sites with a long-term vision to what may or may not happen. And also, I think there's a change. The consumer, I think, has changed too, where they're looking for a fresher, lower alcohol wine. As part of their thing. So I think if you put the two together, it's a strong incentive for wineries to move forward.
Right. Yeah. We've noticed that there does seem to be a lot opening further north, and I wouldn't say I'm a climate change denier or a climate change supporter one way or the other, but I am very interested in market forces, and when I see the market is moving north like that, that's very interesting to me. And I like to know, what is the reason for this? Is it because just like you said, is it because the tastes have changed, or is it just getting too hot down south to grow stuff and people want to move up? And I guess that's probably one challenge we'll have here in Texas as well, is if it keeps warming up. It's already today's actually 94 out here.
Goodness.
Out here in Dallas, it's already real hot. Although where I was this week in Marfa, they don't usually get that much above 95 in the summer even. But let's transition into biodynamic wine, because that's really, you're the first expert I've met or talked to about this. And I get even this weekend when I was talking to people about biodynamic, a lot of them don't really know what it is. They know they've had biodynamic wines. They know that it's good wine. But I guess the most concise explanation that I've gotten from other people who don't really know a lot about it is they say, well, it's kind of like organic on steroids, but adding in a little bit of voodoo.
Well, yeah, I suppose on the surface it seems there's a little bit of voodoo there, but I think there's a little bit of voodoo in agriculture. Yeah, there's very little we know about plants and soil. This is a really almost a new science that's developing now. The study of the microbiome of your soils, replacing so many of the chemicals that have been used with more natural, microbiological type treatments that even large commercial farms are looking to now. So there's this general change in agriculture from chemicals, which have been causing obvious problems over the last decades, and you can see those results in plants now, and even big commercial producers are looking to change to a more natural, integrated system. So you have to kind of go back in history a little bit for biodynamics. Rudolf Steiner, of course, was the first one that really came up with the ideas, but he did this in a series of 8 lectures that over a couple of weeks, and he existed at a time right after World War I, where it was in Germany and Austria, millions of people had just been killed. the economy and the culture was in total devastation. And during this process, chemical farming had been introduced very dramatically, and a lot of people were terrified by the changes that were happening. And Steiner was a philosopher, so he came up with these lectures actually at the request of a group of farmers and gave this outline. And much of what we call biodynamics today actually came after that, with a group of scientists that began to apply science to biodynamics and try to come up with reasons. But, there's been so much, we've learned so much in the last decades that we have to take, as we would with anything, it's like medicine in the 1950s. You wouldn't want a surgeon from 1950 to do your cancer operation today, even though he may have been the best surgeon in the world in 1950. So what's happening, I think, is a real evolution in this, taking what the concept was of biodynamics and understanding that there was a kernel of truth in everything. And now we're trying to apply science to each of these aspects, because overall, we've all seen biodynamics work in years. But the question is, which parts work and which parts don't? And there certainly are parts that do, certainly parts that don't. And right now we're working within the framework of biodynamics that is, while we try to dig in and find those parts. So the easiest way I can think of to describe biodynamics is basically you're taking organic agriculture and then applying a very proactive, probiotic approach to your vineyard. So the biggest part of biodynamics is a very serious composting program.
Okay.
So we're here, we have a 100-acre farm. We're producing 250 tons of biodynamic compost every year that we're applying back into the soils. And the goal of that, and also the famous Preparation 500, which everybody sees because it makes great pictures with the horns and all that. Is the idea is to rebuild the fungi and the bacteria, the whole microbiome of your soils. And so, because, people tend to think of plants that they stick their roots down and they just drink up all this nutrition. That's not how it works. There's fungi and bacteria around the roots that actually transform the minerals and nutrition that's available in the soil into something that the vine can then take in and use.
That's interesting, because this weekend when I was talking to the vintner who I was helping out, he was talking about a very similar thing. Is he said one of the reasons he wants to either use pesticides very, very sparingly or not use them at all, which is one of the reasons he chose the site he chose, is because he said a big problem in wine right now is they use all these pesticides and stuff, and it kills all the bugs in the soil, all the bacteria and the nitrifying bacteria and all that sort of stuff. And then they are forced to then use fertilizers to get that nitrogen and other types of things back into the soil. And he says it just doesn't. It's not a living wine anymore. It's just this product that people bottle and sell en masse. He wants it to really express the terroir of his location. It's got to express the bugs that live in the soil.
Right. So exactly, it's kind of this multi-layered thing that people have been doing in agriculture. So when you apply a pesticide, you also kill all the good bugs. Yeah. And so the bad bugs are much better at then building their population up than the good bugs are. And so you end up with a lot more bad bugs. And the same thing happens in the soil. If you're putting Roundup down to kill weeds and things like that, you're killing also the fungi and the bacteria in your soil. And then if you layer on top of that over irrigation and nitrogen fertilizers, you really break down the plant's ability to feed itself. You really turn it into like a little drug addict. It loses its ability to generate its own food, so it needs to rely on these fixes, these shots of nitrogen and water to survive. And so that makes for a very weak plant. And a weak plant then is more susceptible to viruses and other vine diseases. So you get into this terrible circle of an ongoing weakening of the plants, and then having to apply more chemicals.
Okay, so when you guys decided, now you're at Troon Vineyard now. Was Troon Vineyard always a biodynamic vineyard, or did you?
No. It was conventionally farmed, and the soils were really in bad shape.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful site. I mean, it's really an ideal site. Ideal exposure, a perfect roll to the southwest, granite soils. So it has great potential. That's why I came here.
Okay.
But it had been conventionally farmed, and that's why I leapt into biodynamics right away, because I knew that this was the most regenerative type of practice to use to bring these soils back as quickly as possible.
How long did it take you guys to revive the site and get sort of a living soil going again?
I'd say it takes about 3 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think you notice right away, even in the first year, you'll notice changes. But by the third year, you really are seeing dramatic changes.
Okay.
I'd say though, for something that's been commercially farmed, you're looking at a decade to really bring it back 100%. But you see improvement almost immediately.
And did you have to pull any of the vines out, or did those same vines? Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah, because they had been weakened by the farming practices that were passed. They had various trunk diseases or viruses.
Oh, okay.
So you have to look at, and also they weren't planted as well as they could have been. So, and the soil prepares. So you have to look at a vine, and I'm trying to keep them all alive as long as I can, but some of them were just too far gone.
Okay. So that was probably a lot of work that you guys had to go in there and select out which ones you were pulling out and putting in new ones.
Yeah. I tended to do it not by block. You said you have to say, okay, this block is just gone, and maybe 25% of the vines are fine, but then it doesn't become viable. You have to kind of go in and say, okay, I'm going to take this block out, properly prepare the soils, so that, we rip it down to 3 feet, and then we're adding 5 tons of biodynamic compost per acre before planting.
Wow. Okay.
Planting in a certain way. So you're really trying to reestablish the soil. And the best way to do that is when there's no plants in it, because then you can really work it.
Right. That makes sense. Now, when they hired you at Troon Vineyard, did they select you specifically because you were interested in biodynamic wine, or did you bring that idea to them?
I brought the idea. That was my solution. Yeah.
So they were were they experiencing problems and they just needed somebody to help out, or?
Yeah. It was a transition of ownership.
Okay.
So they were looking for new solutions.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So in the biodynamic process itself, once you've reestablished this soil and your vines are growing healthy again, from what I understand, there's like certain days that you do certain things. Is that something that they still do, or is that just something that is left over from when it was originally, like, there's vine days and like and watering days?
There's kind of multiple ways to look at that. First of all, you have to look at it on a practical level. If you're doing a home garden, it's really easy to follow.
Yeah.
But if you're farming 100 acres, if you only limited it to flower days, and leaf days, you would never be able to get your work done.
Right.
So you have to. Our goal is to try to follow that. But I would say on a broader range, what we try to do is really try to follow the general range of an ascending and descending moon.
Okay.
Because, I mean, just like you see with tides in the ocean, there are certain fluctuations that happen, and it probably doesn't make those kind of decisions. Don't make if you're just trying to make good wine, they probably don't make any difference. But if you're trying to make something really, really special, what you're trying to do is to take advantage of every little opportunity to improve it, no matter how small it may be.
Right.
So, in trying to follow the calendar, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that extra little margin of quality.
Yeah.
But it's not going to decide one way or another the overall quality of what we do.
And you see that your customers really appreciate that they're seeking out biodynamic wine in particular?
A lot are. I mean, there's certainly a lot of people that are in general seeking foods that are not treated with chemicals.
Right.
And there is, a community of wine aficionados that really do look towards biodynamic wines. And I think it's because several reasons. First of all, of course, the obvious one that is there you don't have, there's no chemicals. It's all natural in the winemaking. But also I see a philosophy of winemaking among biodynamic winemakers that emphasizes freshness and purity of place. Mm-hmm. And so people that are, I think, seeking unique experiences and wines that have a natural freshness to them are seeking out biodynamic wines.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And have you noticed? I mean, you've been in the industry for a while. Have you noticed that this is an expanding trend that more people are becoming more interested in it?
Dramatic. I mean, there's actually a whole niche market that's developed. There's distributors now in most markets that specialize in natural wines. Okay. And ranges of wine shops and wine bars and restaurants that are actively seeking out these wines. Mm-hmm. In the scope of the wine industry, it's a very small percentage. Right. But for small wineries like us and the other biodynamic wineries, I think there's more than enough to accomplish that.
Okay. Airplane noise.
Okay. I shut the window.
It's no problem at all. No problem.
It's a farm. What can I say?
Exactly. Well, it makes it authentic.
That's right. There you go.
Well, one thing that you mentioned on there was that more people are seeking out natural wines, and that was, I'm getting exposed to a lot more of these conversations now that I've been hanging out with people who actually are in the know a little bit about a wine. And one of the big conversations that this last weekend that I was listening to was they were talking about natural wine versus organic wine versus biodynamic wine. And one of the guys that I was hanging out with, he's a wine seller. And he was saying that we're getting this a lot where people are presenting us wines that are quote unquote natural, but there's no definition for that. Whereas when they get a biodynamic wine, they know exactly what it is. And when they get an organic certified type wine, they know exactly what that is. Have you had any experience with this where people are trying to market this as a natural, but there's no clear definition for that? And do you see that you have an advantage with biodynamic wine, whereas there is a clear practice and a clear procedure that you follow to make your wine biodynamic?
Yes, I think that's really important. The natural wine name has been kind of bastardized, because you've got people that will buy grapes that have every chemical in the world applied to them. Mm-hmm. And then just because they don't use sulfur in making the wine, they call them natural wines. Okay. And to me, that's just not true. Yeah. A natural wine to me should imply the farming almost more than the winemaking. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you 100% that a certified biodynamic or a certified organic wine is on a different level than somebody that just says natural, which of course doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, that was kind of that was sort of the consensus with everybody there, as they were saying, well, we don't really know what that means. Now, one thing that you touched on there was in the winemaking practice that they were talking about to me was that if you are making the wine in the correct way, you really don't have to add sulfur because it'll preserve itself based on the profile of the grapes. Mm-hmm. In biodynamic, what is the procedure once you've harvested and you're producing the wine? What are the things that you do so that you don't have to add additives to the wine to make it so that it'll preserve, it'll have a shelf life, and it'll be available for people for several years?
Well, the most important thing to all of this, and not having to add anything in the cellar or do any sort of unusual artificial technique in the cellar, is healthy fruit. Okay. This is most of the nasty things people hear about that people do in winemaking are because the fruit was less than healthy. And then they have to take some sort of action and correct that problem. Mm-hmm. What we're trying to do with biodynamics is to create a vine that is so healthy that it produces healthy fruit, so that we don't have to do those things.
Okay. So that's, I guess that's what they were kind of alluding to when I was listening, is that if you have a healthy grape, or a grape that is produced correctly, you don't have to add all these things, because the profile of the grape itself will have the correct amounts of everything to make a wine that has a shelf life and tastes amazing for however long it takes for you to drink it.
Right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with adding a very low amount of sulfur before bottling. Just a little, we'll do that. We add, it's maybe 20 to 30 parts per million that we add just for bottling. It's just a stabilizer in the bottle. It actually helps the wine age better.
Okay.
I mean, it's all free sulfur, so the amount of it is, I mean, it's extremely low.
Right.
For instance, to get a biodynamic certification, the maximum level is 100 parts per million, and we're at about 30.
Okay. Wow. That's very low.
Yeah. So just enough to give it a good stabilizing effect to the wine in the bottle.
Well, and the purpose for the sulfur is just to basically bond with any of the free radicals or whatever they're floating around in the wine that could damage other parts of it.
Yeah, it's just chemistry.
Okay, that makes total sense. That makes total sense to me. Now, sort of along those same lines, one thing, and I don't know the process of winemaking very well, but you don't ever add any yeast. It's all natural fermentation, right?
That's correct. Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
So then,
what goes into our fermenters is grapes. That's
okay.
it.
And so whatever is on the skins of the grapes or in the fruit, once you crush it and put it into the fermenter, that's what's going to impart that flavor is from these. So I know a little bit about beer brewing, and I know from beer brewing that different yeasts that you select can impart different flavors to it. And now that I'm getting a lot more into wine and understanding a lot more about wine, I understand that the yeast is probably going to play a much stronger role in terroir, because you're going to have different species of yeast depending on where you are.
Yes, I mean, in fact, the native yeasts are part of terroir.
Okay,
they're part of the natural environment that gives your wine the flavor that it has. So what you have basically happened, there's many types of yeasts. Okay, and so in a native fermentation, during the early part of fermentation, you have many yeasts that are at work. But most of those strains can't survive more than 4 or 5% alcohol, which is obviously a big difference between beer. So then there's the Saccharomyces strain that in the beginning of fermentation doesn't do much, but then it's a very aggressive yeast and eventually takes over the fermentation and then takes it to dryness. That's what it's a strong yeast, so it finishes. But in that early part, those first days where you have all those different yeasts they each are adding some nuance, some flavor, some texture, and that is part of your site.
Okay.
If that's what you're trying to express. And then when the Saccharomyces comes in, they're just doing the general labor. They're just finishing it out.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So the typical way for most people, that are adding yeast is when the grapes come in, they'll press it and add sulfur right away and kill off all the native yeast.
Oh, okay.
And then just add Saccharomyces, and then which just goes through and finishes very efficiently, but it doesn't add these extra nuances
right
to the wine. The trick is, of course, a lot of those native yeast, if they were to do the entire fermentation, they would eventually add flavors you don't want.
Okay.
So it's that getting that right combination. And the yeast, they make alcohol as a way to fend off competing bacteria and yeast for the sugar. Now, obviously, that's a good short-term strategy, but not a very good long-term strategy, because they end up killing themselves. But
yeah.
But it's that getting that balance and allowing that first few days for the wide variety of yeast to give their imprint, and then letting Saccharomyces take over and finish.
Have you noticed any unique characteristics of the yeast that are local to Applegate that you're getting in your wines?
Yes. I mean, it really, there's everybody, it's every region, because the yeasts are local to the area, will add their own little nuance and textures to us. I know for me, it adds a texture, a roundness to the mid palate.
Okay.
And an almost floral aromatic.
Oh, okay. That sounds really good. I might try. I don't know if you guys ship to Texas, but I do go to Oregon.
We're working on it. We do ship to Texas, and we're working on distribution there shortly.
Okay. Well, actually, I do go through Oregon once a year, so maybe next year, maybe this year, actually probably in August, I'll try to stop by and try.
You have to come visit.
I will. Yeah, that would be really, really fun. Kind of like on the same note as just the process of making wine. I noticed that on the Troon Vineyard site, you guys make a lot of different wines. What is your favorite to make? Or actually, I'm sure you like making a lot of them, but do you have a favorite of what you're producing? And do you notice from year to year, since you're doing, when you're a large winemaker, kind of what you're going for is consistency. But when you're a smaller winemaker and using this biodynamic practice, you're looking to express the terroir, which does change from year to year. So have you noticed a big difference between your vintages? And also, what is your favorite so far? And have you been learning every year? Do you learn something new? And do you adjust your practices a little bit?
Every year you do learn something new, and it's a unique aspect to agriculture and viticulture is that, I always get frustrated. I see these computer companies, they do iteration after iteration. Something goes wrong, they say, it's 14.12, the next day it's 14.13, they fix it. We get one iteration a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a much slower learning process. It takes a lot more thought and research. Because when you plant a vineyard, it's 6 years before you know if you were right or wrong, if you're just guessing. So, we've gone through this process. We brought in Vineyard Soil Technologies, a group of PhDs down in Napa, and we dug 75 5-foot deep soil pits, did complete soil analysis on every aspect of the site. We're working with a company called Wine SEQ out of San Francisco in Spain. They're genetic sequencing. So,
cool.
We dug down into every aspect of our soil, what's on the grapes, what's in the fermenters, and then have been using all this data to select what we feel are the ideal varieties for this site. So that's the process we're in. And I have always associated the site with southern France, particularly Languedoc.
Okay.
And so we're going in that direction as we replant and redevelop. So I'm putting in 10 new acres this spring. It's all based on these southern French varieties. So Syrah, Mourvedre, Grenache, Marsanne, Roussanne, and even Tannat and things like that. So that's what we do. Tannat has been particularly interesting on this site because on a granite soil, you get a naturally softer, silkier tannin. And of course, Tannat is famous for having very aggressive tannins. Yeah. And so we are able to naturally, without any effort on our part, moderate those tannins and make a more approachable style of Tannat. So that's been really fascinating. So is that, but I think what's really interesting to me in the long run here is developing blends of those varieties. Again, very much like you see in southern France, like GSMs and Mourvedre and Grenache, and then Marsanne, Roussanne, these type of things. I think these are going to be the most interesting wines in the long run.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I've actually, and I don't know if this is an American thing or just a me thing, but one of the things that when Mason and I first started out doing this show is that we were really only wanted single varietal wines. And then I started getting exposed more to blends, and it's so interesting what people can do by blending them and making adjustments to how much of one or the other grape is in it, or just from this site putting it with this other grape from this other site, and you come out with these really interesting wines that are a much more complete palette than just single varietal Cabernet Sauvignon, which can be very, very good, but just it has a different. It's like almost like painting a picture. You can paint it with one color, and it might be nice and it might be a pretty color. But if you're painting it with multiple colors, you end up getting a scenery and just something a little more interesting. And I've noticed that a lot lately since we've been trying more wines. Like I've started really liking some of the Spanish blends and some of the French blends that we and it seems to be much more of a European thing to blend it, and then in America they do these single varietals.
Right.
And so I don't know if that, you know,
if you think about it, I mean, if you get outside of Barolo and Burgundy, almost every place else are blends.
Yeah. Yeah.
France, you know, so, and Italy.
Right.
And also another thing we're really working to do is whenever possible, we prefer to do co-ferments instead of blends.
Oh, okay.
Because when you co-ferment the varieties, you actually slightly change the chemistry in the fermenter. And it's like you end up with I always describe it as like we created a new variety. It's just, often you taste blends, you know, and 1 month it kind of tastes like the Cabernet, and 2 months later taste it, and the Merlot is kind of, but when you do a co-ferment, it doesn't do that. It totally integrates and becomes this new expression.
And that a co-ferment is when you're picking both types of grapes and then you crush them together and ferment them together.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
That's super interesting. I don't, do they normally label that as a co-ferment? Cause I don't know that
I mean, it's certainly something you would see a lot in southern France again.
Okay.
It's a very typical way to do it. And in the old days, you go back a couple hundred years, the growers in those days would plant multiple varieties in their vineyard as kind of a agricultural insurance policy. You know,
oh, okay.
Because some varieties would ripen better in various years in various conditions. So if you had a nice mix, you would get a crop every year, and you just ferment them all together. That was kind of the origin of a lot of winemaking. Even in California, the early days in the 1800s and things like that, that's what they did.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like if you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Exactly. That was exactly. They were just farmers. They were just looking to make sure they got a crop.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Let's pivot real quick to some business, the business side of this, because that I noticed that's also something you have a lot of experience in, and something that I'm very interested in is the business side of wine. When you're making all of these biodynamic wines, we touched on it a little bit earlier. Do you notice that any particular varietal or blend or co-ferment that you're doing out of Troon Vineyards sells better, or is it just people are just interested so they buy everything and you sell out of everything, or how does business work with
I guess it's hard for me to say because we don't make any of the big name varieties. We're not making any Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot or Pinot Noir or Chardonnay.
Right.
I mean, we're specialized in these southern French varieties. So, we're doing Tannat and Vermentino and Marsanne and this kind of thing. So we are really a niche type product. And I understand that. But fortunately, there's enough people out there looking for interesting wines that are outside of the kind of commercial blandness that you see in the market, where all the wines kind of taste the same. What I always say, I make 5,000 cases of wine. There's 300 million Americans, so I can't find enough people for that.
Yeah.
I'm doing my job.
Right. that makes total sense. What about now? You label your wines as biodynamic, and that is a certification process that is private, or is that something that the government has to regulate for you? Because I know that the government has to approve your label.
So the organic certifications have to go through the NOP, the national standards, to be qualified. But Biodynamic is certified by Demeter, which is an international organization, but we are certified by Demeter USA, the American branch.
Okay.
Who has a full range of, obviously we have to go through extensive reporting and inspections and things like that to maintain our certification. So in the case of organics, you're certified through a government standard.
Okay.
In the case of biodynamics, we are certified through the Demeter International Standard, and the Demeter Biodynamic trademark is trademarked.
Right.
So you can't use it unless you're certified. So they're slightly different in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But to qualify for a biodynamic certification, the first step is to be organically certified.
Oh, really? Okay. So
that's like the base of it. That's like step one is you have to be organic.
And that involves its own series of inspections and that sort of stuff?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And is this something that it's standard across all of the states, or?
Yes.
Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't really sure how the organic process, I see it in the stores and stuff like that, and I'm like, I'm not sure what they do for this organic.
Yeah, there's USDA organic, and then they certify various agencies like CCOF or Oregon Tilth to do the certifications.
Okay.
And then you get it. But they follow the government standard.
Right. Do they have to, is that at your own expense, obviously?
You bet.
And is it pretty expensive?
Well, it's not cheap, but they do a lot of work.
Right.
People coming out actually doing inspections, they're very serious about their work.
Right.
Demeter in particular has a very stringent, inspection process. So I'm sure that what we pay them, they're not getting rich on. I'll tell you that.
Well, yeah, that's not exactly. That's not exactly what I meant. I just was curious, from a business standpoint, how much does that impact your business that you have to take these things into account?
Well, as a compared to the cost of actually doing it, it's pretty insignificant.
Okay.
Right.
That's
not any kind of burden.
Okay. All right. Well, I was just curious about that in general. Is what costs were involved and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the label itself goes, so you get a trademark symbol from the Biodynamic organization, and yes. I guess you get a USD. You're able to also use the USDA organic symbol as well if you choose to.
Yes, that is available if you choose to. Yes.
Okay. So, but then do you have to submit your labels? Now, are these on the labels, or is this in addition to the label? And do you have to submit that as well to the government to get approved?
No. Once you have your certification, you just include it. It's printed on your label that you submit to the TTB, and that's as long as it's the recognized symbol, you're fine.
Okay, all right. And at Troon Vineyards, do you guys have like a tasting area and stuff? Because I noticed that on your blog you say that you're really also into the experience of food. Mm-hmm. I had pretty good experience this last weekend again, where I went down to a vineyard here in Texas, and one of the cool things that they did was they paired specific food with specific wine. So you had this wine tasting that they kind of paired that. Do you guys try to do something similar to that? Do you offer food at your tasting room, or is there some sort of regulation that doesn't allow you to do that, or how does that work?
What we do is we work with local Oregon producers that are making cheeses and charcuterie organically, and then so then we offer a selection of those to taste with the wine.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool. I definitely need to stop by.
Yeah, it's try that. All local things,
Yeah. So. That's my wife and I. That's one of our favorite things. Although she doesn't drink wine, but one of our favorite things is to get like interesting cured meats and interesting cheeses and pickled items and stuff like that. That's what we love, those types of things.
Well, we're in the process of planting 200. Heritage clone apple trees right now. We'll be making our own ciders. So
wow. Yeah. Oh, that'll be really cool, actually. And the ciders you're going to do in the biodynamic fashion as well? Wow, that's really
that's
cool.
Part of biodynamics is you're not to be a monoculture.
Uh-huh.
So we're planting apples, we're putting apiaries in, we're doing our own honey. We'll have a sheep flock in here next year, so we have livestock on the area. For the be in the vineyard in the winters, and we're doing a development of a block of heritage Oregon seed buckwheat.
Wow! Okay.
Propagate the seed, and then we'll have a 2-acre vegetable garden.
That's really impressive. Yeah, that's going to be really, really cool. Now, when you're planting these, is it mixed in with the vineyards, or is it separate sections?
No, they're separate blocks.
Oh, okay.
It's all on the 100-acre property here.
Got it. Okay.
But there are, for farming purposes, for tractors and stuff like that, you keep them separated.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Before I let you go, because I don't want to occupy too much of your time, could you tell me one thing that you are most excited about that's going on at Troon Vineyards, or actually more than one thing if you want, that's going on at Troon Vineyards in the next year or so?
Well, I mean, we're getting our full biodynamic certifications now after a 3-year process. You know, we've been our biodynamic in conversion certification for a while. So getting the final conversion gives you a real sense of accomplishment. You know, that you've done this project and got it there. And the planting of the new varieties, to me, the development of the new vineyard blocks is really exciting, because we've sought out some very unique clones of these varieties that are tied to their regions in France. So very direct lineage to the types of wines that have inspired us. So putting all those together, you know, I feel like we're just stepping off into a very bright future.
You know what? That if I can, I'd like to ask you one more question about those clones, if that's okay. When you are ordering those, because they're unique clones that are a little less common, do you have to get those from Europe? And or do they grow them here in the States?
They have to grow them here. They have to go through a quarantine process.
Oh, okay.
So they're brought in, you know, like UC Davis and Cornell have programs, and they bring them in, they certify them, and then they're propagated by nurseries. Okay. Who then check, because you don't want to spread diseases and things like that. Well, so we're working with, they're called ENTAV, ENTAV clones, predominantly, which are certified particular clones by the French government to specific areas.
Okay. And when they do that, are they putting those clones on the American rootstock, or are these?
We will be. A lot of our vines now are unrooted, but being this close to California, where they have a lot of phylloxera and traffic and so forth, we feel at this point that it's in our interest to graft them, because we're really. I mean, that's another aspect of biodynamics, is I hope these vineyards will be here for 50 or 60 years. Yeah. We plant them. You have to have a sense of, when you're planting the vineyard, you're also doing it for the next generation.
Yeah. Well, and you must be very proud of that too, because now you've got this legacy that'll have old vines going on into, 2050 plus. All these years. Right. That's a pretty good legacy. That's a pretty cool legacy, especially since you were in the ground. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing here that people that I've never met will make wines out of them that I'll never get to taste. But it's just that there's that continuum. Yeah. I think that's very much to the heart of biodynamic agriculture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that might kind of go back into the whole biodynamic voodoo part of it, is that part of this is that you're going to be a part of the terroir of Troon Vineyards for as long as Troon Vineyards exists, because of the impact that you've done on it.
I hope so. That would be my sincere hope.
Okay. Well, that is great. And I want to be respectful of your time, so I will let you go. But do you have anything that you would like to plug? I know that you're on Twitter, at Craig Camp on Twitter. And also I've been reading your blog, which I think is a really great blog. It's got a lot of really interesting information and a lot of great information on biodynamic growing. It's winecampblog.com. Do you have anything else that you would like to direct our listeners to?
Well, just Southern Oregon in particular, the Applegate Valley. This is to come here into an emerging wine region in the United States is really exciting. This is, a lot of people say it reminds them of Sonoma 30 or 40 years ago. Wow. And there's an energy here, and personally, I think it's one of perhaps the most beautiful wine growing region in the United States. And I just really encourage people to come here. There's not just wine here, there's Crater Lake, there's the Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, the Brit Music Festival, incredible trout fishing and whitewater rafting. And if you're into the outdoor lifestyle, you'll love Southern Oregon. So come visit us in Southern Oregon.
Yeah, I can attest to both the Shakespeare Festival and Crater Lake. They're both beautiful, and the Shakespeare Festival is a lot of fun, and Crater Lake is very, very beautiful. It's a great place to go camping. So for our listeners, if you have not been to that part of Oregon, I encourage you to go, because that's one of my many favorite places in the United States is Southern Oregon, because it's a really great place. Well, thank you very much, Craig, for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, and I will probably see you the next time I'm in Oregon.
Fantastic. I guarantee it's much more fun to see us than just talk to us.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll bring my recording equipment too. Maybe we can do another episode when I'm actually there in person and try some of your wines.
I'd love it.
Oh, that'd be great. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
All right, everybody. That was Craig Camp from Troon Vineyards. What a wealth of knowledge. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to him. I'm going to be trying to do a lot more interviews like this with winemakers and people who are, or vintners, people who are growing grapes, making wine, and engaged in the alcohol industry in general. One thing I wanted to remind everybody about is Childeberg. It's coming up soon, so go to childeberg.com and sign up for the newsletter. You can also follow us at Childeberg on Twitter. But most importantly for this show, go to tastinganarchy.com. You can email us at tastinganarchy@gmail.com. You can also follow us at tastinganarchy on Twitter. And I believe that is all of the plugs that I have for this week. I really, really appreciated Craig Camp coming on. I thought that was a really awesome interview. Check out his blog. Check out his website. That is it. That's all I have for today. Thank you for tuning in. Stay free.
Once a year, the world's power brokers meet in secret at a heavily secured facility and discuss the fate of regular people like you. This meeting is known as the Bilderberg.
But you don't have to worry about that because you're going to Childeberg. Childeberg is the premier gathering of free folk in Texas, held at the beautiful Black Rock Park on the banks of refreshing Buchanan Lake in Llano County.
Childeberg 2019, June 8th and 9th.
Chill in the lake.
Make new friends with liberty lovers like you. Enjoy camping in the great outdoors. Hop in the wine van and visit the local wineries. Participate in podcasting magic and much, much more. Email us at tastinganarchy@gmail.com or reach out to us at Childeberg on Twitter for additional details. Childeberg 2019, June 8th and 9th. I'll see you there.